What you can see here is that this is a Norway spruce tree which is dying because of infection from bark beetle.
That's all those small holes there, is it?
Yes. And this is one of the biggest problem now in Germany, that trees are dying. They are getting weaker first because of climate change, and then due to pest and pathogen they are getting dead. And one very problematic pathogen is bark beetle. In this particular area you see that a lot of trees, they are dying from the top, which means that they are under severe stress of drought. And we have consecutive drought years in 2003, 2011, 2014, 2018, 2019. So when you have very hard drought in high frequency, then trees are getting less vital, which can increase the dieback. So what you see here is a catastrophic example of forest death.
Okay, just for you listeners out there, just so that you understand where we are here. I'm in southwestern Germany, in just north of Karlsruhe. It's part of Karlsruhe, really, the Hartwald, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm here with Somidh Saha. He's the head of the research group Sylvanus, Increasing Resilience and Reducing Trade-offs During Forest Transformation. And you work with the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology here. Mm-hmm. So you're a forestry expert, a scientist, and you've shown me here a prime example of just how bad the forest die-off is. I think according to a report published here in Germany, it was said that like 80% of German trees are not well, are not healthy, right?
You are right. And we have surveyed 3,000 trees so far in 2019 and 2020. So we are researching how much ecosystem service our forests provide and what is the general health of our forest here. And we have found that nearly 80% of our surveyed trees are unhealthy, which correspond to the federal level report.
Is that also the problem, why in Germany in particular we've got this major problem? Because most forests here, they are monocultures,
yes,
right?
That is very true. So this is also because of our history here, that after the war, the huge amount of forests were destroyed by the war, and the foresters wanted to plant monoculture in most of the place because they want to guarantee timber supply.
And in your experience, forests worldwide, just how unprecedented is this, what we're seeing right now? Or is this something cyclical where you say, well, yeah, of course, forests die every now and again, that happens?
Yes, what is very unusual for forest dieback in last few years are that young trees are dying. This premature death of the tree is because of climate change induced problem. Forest dieback is a global phenomenon, and that's rapidly increasing in last 2 decades. So the droughts and forest fire are getting more frequent. Although I am giving you an example from north of Karlsruhe, but it is actually a global problem.
I mean, what's the big deal if we lose the forests?
That's a question about our survival. If climate change is happening the way it's happening now, gradually forests will turn first to open areas like scrubland forests, and then gradually it will be converted to desert. What happened to Sahara, for example, that was a natural climate change. What happened to Sahara? Sahara was one time a green forest. But this kind of thing can happen very rapidly in anthropogenic climate change. That is the difference. So I am scared in terms of if we are getting more drier and drier, then our region will be also becoming one day like California or Australia, and then we will have a very big problem in this cultural landscape where villages are kind of interlinked with the forest. So you will see that most of the German cities and villages are surrounded by the forest.
We don't want to depress our listeners too much because there are solutions out there.
Yeah.
You are working on solutions, and we'll be looking at those in a bit more detail, right? But first, Somidh, what do you reckon? It's about lunchtime, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, let's go and have some lunch.
Okay, good.
All right, so got some naan bread here. Still nice and warm, and got an Indian takeaway here, right? Can you just perhaps describe to the listener, because I don't know the terms, what have we got in here, in this bowl?
We got here rajma curry and paneer with spinach. We call it palang paneer. And rice, and this fry is paparam or papar.
Wonderful. And we're sitting here in Karlsruhe's Schlosspark. It's a beautiful park. There's a castle here, the Karlsruhe Schloss, which is modelled on Versailles, right? So it's just a beautiful setting here, and there's some very nice trees. And we thought it'd be a good spot to come for two reasons. One, this is also where part of your project is based. But two, I thought we'd also use this lunch break to get a bit personal, right? Because it's a very interesting story to you and how you came to love trees. It's also in your name, right?
The meaning of my name in Sanskrit is some wood which we use to make a fire for our god, Hindu god Agni. And this wood is coming from sacred tree species like Ficus bengalensis or Eagle marmelos. Yeah.
So you basically have trees, from the cradle.
I don't know how my father thought about that, and although my family wanted that I study medicine, but I ended in forestry.
So you were born in India, but you grew up in Bhutan.
Yeah.
Which is also, that's a very special country, right? Can you perhaps also convey to our listeners what Bhutan is like, also in terms of the forest?
Bhutan is a beautiful country, is a mountainous country between India and China. And most of the region in Bhutan is highly forested and is very less population. And it's a beautiful country. I spent my first 10 years in Bhutan.
And is that how you started to, develop a love for the forest? Would you say you love trees?
Yes, I think so, because I was living in a small house which is just near to the forest. So every morning I would actually see deer coming to our garden. So it's a beautiful time. I spent from 1981 when I was born to 1991.
So just purely on an emotional level now, because I must admit personally for me, the climate crisis, living in Germany, you're living in a bubble. A lot of the things that are happening in the world right now you don't really see. And there were sort of several events, maybe over the past years, that sort of brought home to me the climate crisis is global and it's happening here in Germany. We're not exempt. And one of them was the forest. And, from a very young age, we were in the forest every weekend here in Germany. I grew up in Germany, and it just meant so much to spend time in a forest. And now, though, if I look at the back of my house, the Siebengebirge, those are all spruce. They're all dead. And that really brought home to me just how dramatic this is. And it really, to be perfectly honest, Somidh, it really scares me. I find that really scary. How's it with you? You're a scientist, right? So emotions probably take a back seat. But, what are your feelings when you look at the state of the forest?
I think it's somehow very depressing, and because the forests are dying in a very high rate. And we actually also know that this is very important for our well-being, because we have found that during the time of COVID pandemic and the lockdown, people are increasingly going to the forest in a higher frequency than in the past. So forests are actually not only a place for timber production or biodiversity conservation, and they are also a place for healing. And if they are gone, then we will have a psychological problem in future, in my opinion. Yeah.
And if we look at trees, what is your take on trees? Some people just think, they're there for us to cut down, to use for wood, and that other people are a bit more esoteric and sort of, say that trees actually communicate with one another, that there's far more to trees than we know. Are you sort of spiritual when it comes to trees, or are you sort of more matter of fact?
I think I would say both, because for me, I think forest and tree is also a place for healing for me, because that's also some sort of pastime I would like to spend more in the forest. So I think I have a lot of emotional attachment. So I love my job very much, and that's the reason why I came also to Germany to study forestry, because forestry started in this country. The first forestry school was established near Dresden. And Indian forestry was actually established by the Germans. So the Britishers were hiring German foresters to establish the forestry in India. So the university where I studied was established by a German forester, Sir Dietrich Brandis.
It's interesting, that German connection with the forest, because I sometimes sort of, also looking at history, there seems to be this old, almost mythical Germanic connection to the forest, with the tribes being in the forest area when the Romans came, and the Romans were scared of going into the forest because they would just be pounced upon. So it's almost like it's part of the national psyche, the forest. It's important to the Germans, right?
Yes.
Would you say it's the same in India?
Yes, I think so. Currently, the India we know was different hundreds of years ago. If you know about the old Indian civilizations, like the Indus Valley civilization and later on the Vedic civilization, we will see that the Hindu religion, for example, and Buddhist religion, they actually were very much related to forests. For example, in Buddhism, Gautam Buddha got his enlightenment under a ficus tree, which is located inside a forest. And also in Hindu religion, you will see that life was distributed in 4 different parts. And the last part of the life, you go for salvation, and which generally you go away from the family and spend your life in the forest. So in old ancient India, forest was very, not only culturally but also spiritually related. Yeah, overall, I find a similarity between India and Germany in terms of a spiritual and cultural relationship between communities, societies and forests. In both countries, they are very high. In both countries, I can tell you that there is a similarity between the foresters thinking that we should manage our forest for high biodiversity and also for a mixture,
That's also one of the reasons why we're in this park, right? So you're going to show me one of your project trees, one of the potential solutions to get out of this pickle that we are in. I suggest we hop on our bikes. My rent-a-bike. First time I've rented a bike with a digital, one of these apps, by the way. It worked out with the third bike. But now I suggest we get on the bike and find it, hey?
Good.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, finally caught up with Somidh on his e-bike. Is this it? Oh, wow.
Got it.
Okay, let's just get off the bike and catch my breath. So, this is the red oak, and boy, I can't even see the top. This is it 40 meters? I don't know.
30 to 35, 35 meter.
And this red oak tree, right?
Yeah.
It's from the US.
Yeah.
This part of the results from your project is that this would be a suitable species to help.
Yeah, this could be one of the suitable species. And this was planted around 120, 130 years ago. Yeah, and you see that it's very vigorous tree. So our overall conclusion was that this Quercus rubra, in terms of tree health, they were better than native oak Quercus robur, or so American red oaks' health were better.
They're more resilient.
They are more resilient to drought. And another finding was that the native oak, on the other hand, provide more biodiversity or habitat, microhabitat, and more bat diversity compared to red oak, because one genus was visiting less to non-native oak.
One particular type of bat avoids this tree, doesn't like this tree for whatever reason. Biodiversity. Yeah, the question when you introduce a foreign species, it can have all sorts of unforeseen knock-on effects. Some might be, I don't know, positive, some might not be so positive. I mean, how great is that risk? We've got something like 20 to 30 native species here in Germany. You bring something across from America. If this were to be planted in the forests that are dying right now to help them, recover, can you really gauge that element of risk?
I am not in favor of direct introduction of a species from foreign country to here. Rather, we need a proper screening of that tree species. The problem is this screening sometimes takes century. Quercus rubra is here for 200 years, but a new species, if you don't screen in a long duration, then there is a risk that it can become invasive, which we have to avoid at any cost. Another problem is that climate change is happening so rapidly. The screening time is also getting, a little bit squeezed. So my opinion is that we either try to study the trees which are already existing in the park and in the garden. That is the reason why we selected these trees from the park. And at the same time, when we bring some new species, we try to develop a trial program and to see in the experiment how they're doing. And even we introduce a species, we need to properly monitor it so that we can try to mitigate the negative impact on biodiversity. So it's actually a trade-off between biodiversity conservation and adaptive management. Yeah.
So in a way, what we've got here in the park, it's almost like a practice run. We can see how things pan out.
Yeah.
And then if we have the results and
Yeah.
they're positive, we can say, actually, let's go big on this.
Right.
Let's put it in the forest.
Right. I think park and gardens, which are very strong and well established in Europe. Europe has a very good history of managing gardens and park, are good genetical and biodiversity source to study. All over Europe, in all cities, you will see park and gardens where very old trees and trees from foreign country, from tropical country can be found. And these tree species were brought when climate change was not there. And now they are still growing. So this tree species has a lot of potential that how to study how they survived.
So if we're looking ahead
Yeah.
to the forest of the future,
We have found in our research that when we promote mixed forest and when we actually plant trees in mixture, the dieback is lower because in nature, when there is a diverse forest, then there is a lot of interaction going on between tree species. Some tree species actually help each other. For example, if you plant a nitrogen fixating plant like Alnus or elder, Alnus incana or Alnus glutinosa, and if you mix them with some local tree species, then you will increase the nitrogen level in the soil. So we call this facilitation. So when plant help each other, then it is called a facilitative interaction. And when plant compete with each other, then it is called competition. So the dynamics between competition and facilitation is very complex in a mixed forest. So in the mixed forest is maybe jack of all trades, master of nothing. And monoculture is kind of master of one thing, which is biomass. And that is scientifically proven that mixed forests are more drought tolerant than monoculture, at least in temperate region in Germany. So I would say that if we would have planted mixed forest 50, 60 years ago, we would not see this level of mortality. We would see a mortality, but not this huge level of mortality.
at the end of the day, the message is really that simple. All we need is more diversity.
I think so, because we somehow simplified our forestry very much to the species that we like, and this human selection of species overtake the natural selection of species, and this we need to stop. We value a species based on the quality that we like, and our taste didn't change so much. If you go to a German supermarket, IKEA or anywhere, you will see, don't find furniture from many tree species, only few. But we have so many species. So first of all, we need to maximize our utilization diversity also. And at the same time, we need to maximize the diversity in the forest. And these areas historically was more broadleaf and diverse forest. Although a natural monoculture-like condition will happen more in more adverse continental climate. But in this part of Europe where we are standing, temperate oceanic climate, there historically before Roman times, forests were more diverse.
Some might argue, leave nature be. Don't mess around with it, don't intervene. Nature will rebound, you just have to back off and leave it alone.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel is that an attack on your work, or do you question that yourself sometimes?
We do question that ourselves sometimes, because if we are not in this landscape, if humans are not in the landscape, we can actually leave the nature as it is. The thing is that we need the forest. Forests don't need us, the forest survived without human for most of that time. In this part of Germany, we are very much depending on the forest, right? So if we do nothing, then we will bring timber from tropical country. That's not a solution, right? So we have to grow our timber from our area, and that is good for bioeconomy, and that's good for the climate change mitigation. So that is the reason why I say that we try to intervene in a way more close to nature way, so that we don't do only monoculture planting, but we try to increase the biodiversity. That is more close to nature. It's never truly nature, but it's close to nature.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about trees today.
Yeah.
I have one final question.
Yeah.
Let me make it also personal, because from wherever I've lived in my life,
Yeah.
there's always been a forest, or I've known a forest, and there's always been a particular tree that has been important to me. Do you have any tree that you miss from, I don't know, childhood, Bhutan?
Yeah, I do. And I do miss some trees from Bhutan, and it was very surprising that when I left Bhutan in 1991, that was a huge tamarind tree I really liked. And in 2018, so after nearly 21 years, I visited the same location with my mom, and I still found that tree there. So it was kind of huge wow feeling, you know. When I was 10 years old boy, I used to play here, and then it still is there. And this is quite natural to human, because in science we call it biophilia hypothesis, where because we evolved in forest, we should not forget that. And that was for hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So human intrinsically related to nature and trees, because that was how our ancestors were doing that. So therefore it is emotional connection between a tree and a human, or between a forest and human, can be easily created, and that is because of our past.
Wow, so there's actually science behind my
Yes.
genuine passion for trees, and some individual trees that
that's
are really
called biophilia, or biophilia theory.
wonderful. Okay, so I've just said goodbye, and I'm back on my bike, cycling through the Schlosspark here in Karlsruhe. The tree I'm looking for should be somewhere down here on the left. Just going past this big fountain here, because the university campus is here on my right, just on the other side of the park here. And back in the day, when I was still studying here, I would come out before exams and I would sit underneath this particular tree with my back against the trunk, and I would collect my thoughts and think about, all the stuff I'd rehearsed for the exam. And I don't know, it just really soothed me, calmed me down. And I always went into the exams, with with confidence. I think the tree played quite a big part in this, in calming me down, just reassuring me. This is where it should be. It's not there anymore. Oh, this really is a pity. My maple tree's gone. Anyway, I'll sit with my back to this fir tree then, which is not quite in the same location, but nearby, for my takeaways from this episode. Yeah, I think number one, what Somidh said, we need the forests more than they need us. I think that's something that really has to sink in. They do so much for us on so many levels, not just, producing oxygen and sucking up CO2, but also for our well-being. The fact that, we can just clear our heads, we can spend time in the forests, we can find peace, you name it. They're so good for us on so many levels. And just personally, I'm in the forest every week. So for me, I don't know, it would be devastating if I lost my forest, which is right at the back of my house pretty much. I'm halfway up the hill. And half of it, or it feels like almost half of it, is already dying. where you can see the dead trees, the fir trees, they're just dead. And that depresses me no end, and I really don't want to see more of that in Germany or anywhere else, as a matter of fact. So, but yeah, also on a more scientific level, as Somidh said, this is the other takeaway for me, mixed forests, diversity. Diversity is the buzzword, seems like on all levels. We have to become more diverse, and the forests are no exception. It'll make them more resilient, and resilience is what we need in future. We're going to need a lot more of it. Not just we as humans, but also our forests are going to need it. And there's a bit of a trade-off there with biodiversity, because with resilience, introducing foreign species can have an impact. We don't know the full extent yet. Something we have to keep an eye on. The question whether it's better to just leave the forest be or not, philosophical one. I guess there is a strong case for us to intervene and help the system develop the way that is sustainable both for the forest and also for our needs. But it'd be interesting to see how you feel about that. Should we be intervening in our ecosystems, or should we just leave them be and let nature take its course? What do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Do write us an email to onthegreenfence@dw.com, and I'll get back to you without fail. That's a promise. Okay, so that's it. Time to wrap up. Please do feel free to listen back to other episodes of On the Green Fence if you haven't checked them out yet. You can find them Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We've got plenty of interesting topics that we've covered so far, so do listen in. And if you have the time and are inclined to do so, please do leave us a positive rating or write some comments. We really appreciate any input you can give us, and of course that also helps us grow this podcast and reach more people, which is something we would very much like to achieve. And what else is left? I'm out in the field today, but I do want to thank my colleague Natalie Muller, who helped me produce this episode, and my sound engineer Jürgen Kuhn. Time for me now to bring this rent-a-bike back to the station and get back home. Take it easy and take care.